Okay, let's get into the players themselves. Let's start with Daniels because he's obviously the headliner as the hopeful future of the franchise. With that comes with being the number 2 pick. One thing that I thought was interesting, Logan, I've been waiting to ask you this since Tuesday. You talked so much on the last pod about how great his feet are and his base is underneath him and all that kind of stuff. And it jumped out to me watching on tape. One thing that I thought was interesting, seeing it in person, I thought he was more narrow in person than I was expecting. Like his feet. Now, obviously, he's a slighter build guy, but he was a little bit like taller and more upright, not quite as wide of a base as I was expecting. But he's so quick and he's on balance. And like, I'm not saying that as like it's a problem. It's just different than I thought. And I talked about that on the radio show, and someone left I thought was a smart YouTube comment. Like, he's 6'4". He doesn't have to be big and long to carry, and he also is like super explosive. So he doesn't have to necessarily have these big, wide strides to cover the space in a drop, for instance, that a shorter quarterback would. But I'm just curious, like, as you continue to watch him grow in some of the mechanics, like, is it different than you expected in person, better, whatever? Like, what do you make of kind of watching him go through the fundamentals of playing the position?
Yeah, I think it's better to me. I knew it was good. We talked about this before. Like, when you watch a lot of film, like, it's good, but you don't know like how good it is. And during the film evaluation, like, I was like really, I was on the fence about those top 3 guys, and I really liked all of them. And then I was like, what is the differentiating factor here between these guys? And then you get into the film, you're watching arm angle, you're watching playmaking ability, you watch all the big stuff, and then you start watching their feet. And you're like, man, this dude's feet are excellent. And I think, like, kind of to your point, it's not like this big, long, deliberate drop back. And I think, as you know, like being a strength and conditioning coach, like one of the elements of change of direction and like general athleticism is having a foot cadence, like in terms of number of steps you're taking, that allows you to make adjustments, right? So like long striders tend to have a harder time changing direction. Short striders tend to be better at change of direction, right? That's why shorter receivers tend to be kind of quick and more sudden, in addition to like muscle belly lengths and all that kind of nerdy stuff. But with him, the foot cadence is always something that I love because he's so tight with it. He can accelerate, he can decelerate, he can kind of bounce around in a good base the whole time he's in the pocket. And so again, that kind of goes to your point of like this narrower kind of more under you kind of throwing posture. And I think it's extremely advantageous. And if there was one thing that I think put him head and shoulders above even a guy like Caleb Williams, is that, because it allows you, and I think you see it in 7-on-7, it allows him to get to stuff so quickly. It's not this long, I need to kind of reset my feet. It's like, I'm at the reset right now. And I think that, again, it was something that you were hoping, or I was hoping, would translate, because we talked about this before. He threw a bunch of Bach fades, he threw a bunch of hitches, and that's relatively simplistic footwork. But you're hoping that the dynamic kind of twitchy nature of his feet allow him to get to other stuff. And I think you've seen that over the first, 3 or 4 practices. It's just this ability to be like, I'm throwing this hitch, it's covered, I'm at the check down. And it's like an instantaneous check down. And that's the footwork. And I think like that's something that and I don't want to harp on it too much, because obviously there's a lot of growing still to do and a lot of development that still needs to happen. But I do think that makes him much more compelling as a pocket passer than even I would have thought after seeing it in person during the draft process. Like, I think that him as a passer is going to be significantly better. And I think, like Robert Griffin came out and said, like, he's way better than me as a passer. And I think when you look at his feet, that's like maybe the number one indicator for me of the difference between the two players.
For sure. And the other thing I think it helps prevent from him from a footwork standpoint is he's not going to overstride, because you're not starting so long. And we've seen that, like, we saw that with J.J. McCarthy at Michigan, like throwing, I think it was left. Like he had accuracy issues, or like Drake May, he's got kind of even though he's so big, like he had this like big, wide quarterbacky looking thing. And then his footwork was all over the place when he'd actually go to throw. And with Jayden, he's just on balance all the time. And it's really cool to watch in person. It looks different than, a lot of other quarterbacks that I think you played with, that I covered, et cetera, et cetera. But like, that's not to say that it's wrong or bad or anything. It's actually great. It's better, I would argue, especially with his athleticism, to watch that in person. And the ball just, it's different than watching someone who's got just an insane arm power. But that ball does fly out of his hand. Like his release, watching it in person, like the ball is in his hand, and then it's it's out. It just zips, it pops. It's got that snap to it that the elite guys have in terms of release, and it's really fun to watch. I don't know how much I took out of the 7-on-7 itself. I spent more time, I think, watching the other field, and it's kind of hard to see everything from where we were on the sidelines. But is there anything you were able to garner for where you guys were doing the live stream in the end zone, especially with Jayden on the far side of the field?
Yeah, I think again, it's the I think the composure that he's shown, like kind of the understanding of the offense, which I really appreciate. Like he does such a good job of, again, the deep ball stuff is all there for him. You know, he threw one to Bryson Tremaine. Bryson makes a great catch, but like that deep ball kind of drop, allowing the receiver to adjust. He threw two to Dax Milne. Dax made a great catch on one, got his feet in on the sideline. That's awesome. You know, love to see that. But his ability to work the middle of the field, even not even like the true middle, but like even just like the hashes out, is better. That is progressing. And again, like he had to do some off schedule stuff where he's breaking the pocket and running around a little bit in 7-on-7, but it's not scrambling to run, it's scrambling to throw and getting the receivers to work scramble drill and all that kind of stuff. So again, I think there's just a maturity as a passer that shows up. I think he threw a pick in 7-on-7 if I remember correctly.
I think there was one, yeah.
Yeah, but I think on the whole, like you come away being pretty impressed with just his general process, the footwork, how he gets the stuff, how he gets the checkdowns, how he seems to know and understand. I mentioned this at the rookie minicamp. Hey, they're in, kind of this Tampa 2. Like I need to get the ball down to the back, and it's not like this big labored look down. It's like, oh, okay, good. I'm at the top, ball's out, and it allows the back to make plays. And in 2 minutes at the very end of practice, I thought he did a really nice job of throwing a ball over the middle of the field, like laying it, over the outside ear of the linebacker, inside the safety, right to Cole Turner. Cole dropped it, the ball's wet, whatever, like tough catch. But I like seeing that variation of his throw. And you mentioned that he doesn't, he's got a quick release and the ball kind of jumps out of his hand. He doesn't throw like an overpowering ball. He throws a very catchable ball, which I think is also something that's going to make him kind of endear him to the receivers. And again, like it's early in the process, but I think he's kind of, you always say this, he's passing the test that's given him. He's checking all these boxes. He's obviously studying. His footwork's on point. He's trying to be a passer. He is a passer, but like you're seeing that effort for him to cultivate that skill set at the NFL level. And I think you see a pretty good efficiency from him. And again, we're not charting throws yet or anything like that, but I think that's something that I come away from these practices and being like, okay, like this is a good starting point, and hopefully it continues to grow, and we'll see where he's at week 1.
Meanwhile, on the other field, I feel like the defense was the story. Plays made all over the place. Got Marcus Mariota probably through 3 or 4 picks. Some of those are probably on Mariota. Some of those are just tremendous plays made by Jeremy Chin and others who came away with picks. It's also fun being out there for the first time. It's like, wait, what number is everyone again? A pick by 11? Oh, that's Chin. Welcome, new fella. And so it was cool to kind of see the mixing and the matching and the groups coming together. What stood out, really, I would say more so than like Mariota and the one offense. What stood out from that one defense for you?
I think the fact that Quan Martin's playing safety, I think that was kind of the big thing that came out of it. Him and Jeremy Chin are out there together. I think Jordan McGee getting reps with that group, and how Jordan McGee looks as a player is much different than I thought how he would look seeing him in person. He's just a bigger, like well-muscled person. And I think the fact that he moves so well, he's got that great closing ability. He's got that great instinct, at least it was at Temple. Obviously he's got to grow up and do some stuff there, but I think that was pretty impressive. The rotation at corner, Benjamin St. Juste playing the right corner, Emmanuel Forbes kind of with that second or third group on the main field. And I actually thought Forbes had a pretty solid practice in terms of breaking some stuff up. But, Davis is kind of the starting corner at left corner right now, which is always subject to change. The level of the communication by the defense I thought was very high. I mentioned, I always want to call him Wink. That's not his name. What's the defense coordinator's name?
Joe Witt Jr.
Joe Witt, yes. Joe Witt. And his kind of standard, the way he operated, I thought also was was really good in that situation. So I think just generally a very sharp day from the defense. So obviously the personnel is interesting, but the energy that they played with kind of, and in the same way that the offense was crisp, I thought the defense was crisp, and I'm going to give Witt a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, I think one thing that you can just see immediately, I remember who I was having this conversation with on the sideline, but like if you took an overhead shot of the field and you just had to circle which guys are DQ, AP guys, which guys are holdovers. Just by the size of the players, you could tell who is who. The big physical nature of some of these guys that they brought in is very apparent when you were on the sideline in person. And you're like, oh, that's a Rivera era guy. That's a holdover, a little bit different body type than the Jordan McGee's or the undrafted corner who now I'm blanking on his name.
Anusium, man. He is a big son of a gun, man.
Yeah, you're like, that's a corner? Gracious. Like, there's just a ton of those dudes where, like, they value a physicality and a size and a speed and athleticism that clearly matters. I mean, you look at San Francisco and, like, look at the bullies on the block coming off the bus, when San Francisco pulls up to a stadium. Like, that kind of thing really does translate in a league where physicality can bust up a lot of great schematics and a lot of great skill. And you see the emphasis on that, I think, just when they line up, nevertheless, when they actually start to play.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this in the last show, just the kind of the length that they've acquired, which is kind of falling in your point, but kind of just sitting at it with a different angle, right? It makes it a little bit cloudy, especially with underneath coverage. Dominique Hampton is 6'2.5". He's got 33 and an eighth inch arms. Like, he's 215 pounds. Tyler Owens, the kid from Texas Tech, he's 6'2", he's 220, and he's got 34.5 inch arms. Like Anusium, he's got long arms also. Like, they just cover grass and cloud throwing windows in a way that's very unique. Like, Dominique Hampton on Zach Ertz. And I thought Zach Ertz had a really solid day of practice just in terms of understanding leverages and route stems and how to break leverages and the double sticks and the little subtlety of his route movement was awesome. But Dominique Hampton had him on a crossing route, and it's like, Zach's 6'4", 6'5" almost, 245, 250 pounds. And Dominique Hampton, who is a star dime linebacker, safety type body type, they're the same size. And it's just like, that's such a unique thing to see in terms of the length. And, we knew that was something they were going to target in terms of like how they built that Dallas defense. They have all these kind of tweener type guys, but I guess like the visualization of it, like seeing how it does kind of make things cloudy and the just general size of these players. Again, they're not like fat guys, but they're just tall and long and angular, right, in a way that's that is very distinct. Screams
football player.
Yeah.
Anybody else that stood out for you that you want to mention before we head on to the schedule?
I mean, Pittman had an interception. I mentioned Bryson Tremaine with some catches. I think we got to talk about Luke McCaffrey real quick. Like, that guy is just, he is just a pro, man. He's a pro's pro. Like, you watch him practice, the way he runs his routes, the intensity with which he's practicing. Like, I think it was Mariota, it might have been Driscoll, threw up a post, and it looked like it was distinctly overthrown.
Yeah, it looked like it was going into the woods.
Yeah, so I've had the privilege of playing with some really good receivers that just have this ability to like unhitch the wagon when they need to. Like, they just kind of relax their body, find another gear. And he was able to run under a ball that I thought was clearly underthrown. He also had a play where, I think OZ catches it on like a little hitch or something like that. And he's on, Luke's on the far side and runs all the way across the field at a full speed sprint to cut off the safety for what would have been like the touchdown block. And so I just think, you get that guy in here. I also thought it was interesting that he's playing like predominantly X receiver, like he's backing up Terry McLaurin, like, which I thought was kind of a little bit of a surprise, maybe, like, because I thought he'd kind of fill that big slot role, but a guy that I think is going to be just a tremendous pro. Ben Sinnott, I thought, had some nice catches. Been interesting to see him move around. Colston Yankoff, the guy from UCLA, is a guy that when I see him run, I'm just like, dang, like you're a better athlete than I anticipated. Armani Rogers, seeing him back on the field, like he looks the part. Like, I know he's got to get healthy and I know he's got to get back in football and start running routes and stuff, but he runs like a receiver and he looks like an offensive tackle, man. He is a big dude. So those are some names that stick out to me on the main field. Those are kind of the big ones in terms of catching the football and just kind of making a good impression on day one in conjunction with all the defensive players. I think I've mentioned Pittman had an interception, the linebacker, the new guy. That's always good to see. But that's kind of high level stuff.
Yeah. The other two things I'll mention real quick. One guy that stood out that was not on that main field was Jamin. But he also, I think, was playing a lot of Mike on the second field. Like he was definitely that, or he's just doing a good job of communicating, but he very much seemed to be in the middle of the field. So I think that's interesting. Like, what kind of role do they see from him? And like, kind of, is that cross training? Will he be on the main field tomorrow? Like, what, or next week? Like, who knows? But that's something to kind of watch what role Jamin Davis has. And then you mentioned the receiving room. They added Damiere Byrd as part of a workout yesterday, so they signed him. So clearly they want to keep kind of tinkering at this receiving position. I'm curious what exactly they are looking for that they don't feel like they have right now. That they brought in Martavius Bryant, they brought in Damiere Byrd, they brought in a bunch of guys to work out. They ultimately wind up signing Byrd for right now.
I think that is probably correlated with, I was watching, I think it was Routes on Air, and I think Rosemead Jack Saint slipped, and he kind of tweaked his hamstring a little bit. It looked like he kind of grabbed up and was walking towards the sideline. So I don't know if that's a tinkering thing or more just like we need a body, for camp or for the off season. And I would kind of lean towards the latter there, which is really disappointing. Talk about a guy that I was really excited. I had a really high draft grade on him, not really high, but I had a draftable grade on him. Really liked the player. Thought he kind of filled an interesting niche in terms of special teams, like size, value. And then to see him get hurt kind of week one of the offseason program is tough, but hopefully he gets healthy and, can kind of make his mark later in training camp. So
so we'll see. We'll see what ultimately happens there. Week 2, we're back there next week, right? We're just in it now.
We're in it.
Okay, so week 2 OTAs next week. For now, the schedule.